Hello and welcome to a spooky video, the Grimm way. Today I have for you a lovely romance filled with love and marriage and castles and just a smidge of murder. Now this is the tale of the Castle of Murder. And this was included in the Brothers Grimm first collection of tales in 1812, being the Children's and Household Tales. But it was dropped from later versions for obvious reasons. Because if you remember from some of my other Grimm videos, the first version of the Children's and Household Tales wasn't meant for children, it was meant for adults. But when parents started complaining or saying to the brothers, look, kids are reading these, can you tone it down a bit? They complied, and later versions were not as gruesome and descriptive as the first. But where possible, we are going with the original versions. Now, for this tale of the Castle of Murder, you will see many similarities to Charles Perrault's tale of Bluebeard and another of the Grimm's tales, one of the most scariest, being The Robber Bridegroom, which is coming later in the month. But for this, there are many parallels to Bluebeard, and if you want to check out the video I did on Bluebeard, check it out up there. Or up there. Somewhere above my head is where it's going to be. Now this tale starts us off with the classic fairy tale opening of Once Upon a Time. And in this, the Once Upon a Time is that there was once a poor shoemaker, because as there are any other ones, who had 3 daughters. Now one day while the shoemaker was out, around came a very well-dressed nobleman, and this nobleman had a splendid gold carriage filled with liveried servants, people picking up after him. The guy was rich and wasn't hiding it. Now, of course, he fell in love with one of the daughters, who thought herself very lucky to have bagged herself such a fine, obviously rich gent. And so she agreed to ride off into the sunset with him. Because of course, nothing could go wrong with riding into the sunset with a very rich stranger that you've just met. Now, as they were on their way to his home, it started to get dark. And the maiden started to find a bit uneasy, finally figuring out that she's with a strange man she's not married to, and it's getting dark. In the middle of nowhere, she doesn't know the way home. Clever girl right there. But the nobleman turned to her, and being a poet, he turned to her and said, "The moon is very bright, my horses are dashing into the night. My dear, are you having any doubts?" "Hell yes," she said, "I am having doubts all over the place. Don't know where I am with you. Why, take me home." Of course she didn't say that. She replied, "Well, why should I be having any doubts? You seem a very trustworthy sort, and a obvious gentleman. Gentlemen don't do anything, depraved." But really, deep down, she did feel a bit uneasy. Now when they were travelling through a dense, dark forest, because is there really any other kind, the maiden asked her beloved the eternal travelling question, "Are we there yet?" And the gentleman nodded and pointed to a light in the distance and said, "That light, that there is my castle. That's where we're going." And when they arrived into the courtyard, everything was as she had always dreamed it would be. It was beautiful. However, the very next day, after picking up this random maiden and taking her back to his castle and leaving her there, the gentleman decides that he has some very urgent business and he has to leave and go somewhere else. She can't go with him, she has to stay in the castle. But he trusted her after one day and left her the keys to the castle, the key for every single room in the entire place, so that she could explore and not be bored while he was gone. And explore she did, as would we all. And also so that she could explore all of his treasure that he kept in a treasure room, and which, as mistress of the castle now, because when did they get married, but apparently as mistress of the castle now, the treasure was hers as well. So she might as well go and have a look at it. Now, as soon as he was gone out the courtyard, the dust hadn't even settled yet. She grabbed the keys and she went looking and exploring. Which, yeah, I would as well. And soon enough, she had found herself exploring the whole castle. From top to bottom, she had been in every room, and every room was to her satisfaction. Every room was just filled with beautiful, beautiful things. And the maiden was completely happy with her lot. She was completely satisfied until she came to the cellar door. Now, she'd explored every other room in this castle, every floor, top to bottom. And so she opened the door. But on opening the door, she found herself face to face with an old woman sitting on a stool and scraping out bloody intestines. That's one hell of a welcome. And the maiden exclaimed, "My goodness!" Not the first exclamation that would come to my mind, but we'll go with it. She exclaimed, "My goodness! Granny, what are you doing?" Also, FYI, just if you walk into a room and see an old person sitting on a stool scraping out anything, I wouldn't call them Granny. I would be a bit more respectful. Especially in a fairy tale world. You never know who these grannies are. The old woman answered that she was obviously scraping out intestines. Surely the maiden could see that with her own eyes. And tomorrow, the maiden shouldn't worry, because tomorrow the intestines she would be scraping were hers. Now, as you can imagine, the maiden at this was quite terrified, and she dropped the key she was holding into a gigantic puddle of blood. And no matter how hard she tried, she could not wash the blood off of this key. Although why she would want to when he gave her the keys and told her she could go anywhere. So you're seeing the similarities. With a lot of fairy tales, there are a lot of similarities between the two, and this one definitely is an early version. The old woman, still sitting on a stool with the intestines in hand, started cackling at her, and told the maiden that now her death was certain, as now the master would know that she had gone into the cellar, and no one was allowed in the cellar except the master and the old woman. Although he never stipulated that fact before he left, he just said she could go anywhere. Now here's where you can tell it's more of a rough version of a fairy tale for what it would be like further down the line, is that there's just a random sentence here in it that says that this was the exact same way that her two elder sisters had met their demise at the hands of this nobleman. But surely she would remember him. If he's married two of her sisters and they've both gone, then wouldn't you make that connection when he first rocked up to the house? And why on earth would you agree to go with him? It's just, there's bits like that that are missing or not filled in, but we're going to go with it anyway. Now just then, a hay wagon that had been in the courtyard delivering hay began to drive out of the castle courtyard, and the old woman turned to the maiden and said, "The only way you can escape this castle and keep your life is to climb on that hay wagon and hide yourself and get out and escape," which the maiden promptly did. Now, in the meantime, while she's all in the hay, the nobleman returns to his castle, and he searches all over for his to-be bride, or already bride, you're not really quite sure. And and can't find her. So he goes to the cellar and asks the old woman if she had seen her. And the old woman said, well, since I had no more, I'd finished all my work for today and there wasn't really anything else to do, and your maiden was going to be slaughtered tomorrow anyway, I thought I would bring it, forward a day and save time. So, she's dead. Here's a lock of her hair for your collection. How big is this collection? And if she searched the castle from top to bottom, how did she not find a collection of random hair? But here's a lock of her hair to add to your collection. The dogs ate her heart and are licking up her warm blood off the floor as we speak, as you can see, and devoured the rest. And I'm just sat here, these intestines that I'm scraping out are hers. So, it's done. Now, the nobleman was glad the maiden was dead. What did he get out of it if he wasn't even there to kill her? Where's the fun? Now, meanwhile, the maiden, who's hidden in this hay wagon, rocks up at another castle, and she promptly climbed out of the hay wagon into a very, very full castle courtyard and told everybody there everything she knew. She snitched. Now, the maiden was asked to remain in the courtyard where she was while the guards or the quartermaster or whoever was there went to go fetch the lord of this castle, because of all these crazy things that this random woman who jumped out of a hay wagon was saying about one of his neighbours. Now, the lord of this castle listened to the tale and said, well, you can't really go anywhere now, because if he sees you, you're, dead. But after a while, this lord organised a great feast and invited all of the gentry in the region. It was the party of the decade. Everybody had to be there, including the nobleman of the Castle of Murder, because you can't miss a good party just because you've killed a few folk. Now, since she knew that the nobleman of the Castle of Murder would be there, of course, then he'd recognise her. So the maiden changed her features and her dress. Although how she changed her features, who knows? Now, once everybody had gathered around this table, everybody had to tell a story in order to be able to eat, to sing for their supper, as it were. And the maiden was sat with the guests. Now, when it was the maiden's turn, she stood up, and she had a very sordid tale to tell. And it concerned the nobleman present, who she stared at the entire time she was telling it. And at which point, when she got to the hay wagon part, the nobleman stood up and tried to force his way out of the room. However, the lord of the castle, who had given the great party, had planned ahead, and he already had the authorities waiting outside to take the nobleman into custody to pay for his crimes. And he wasn't killed, but he went to prison. And that's the last you see of him. Now, in the meantime, the Castle of Murder, because it was the site of so many atrocities, it was completely destroyed. Not one stone of it remained standing. It was just bulldozed, absolute rubble, nothing left of it. Now, all the belongings and all the treasure that were found within this castle were given to the maiden. Why? She wasn't his wife. So she inherited this castle full of treasure, although there was no castle anymore, but all this treasure. And what is a girl to do with all this treasure and single? She got married. And whom would she marry? She married the son of the lord who threw the party. And don't tell me that wasn't planned. Because, of course, you could get the treasure of this random castle by destroying it and giving it to this single young village girl. Yes, village girl, you can marry my son, and the treasure can come to me. Ha ha. In any other fairy tale, that guy'd be dead and all. But the maiden thought herself extremely lucky. Not once did she make contact with her poor father, the shoemaker, although having 2 daughters already dead and leaving the other one at home to get taken by the nobleman, not exactly father of the year. But the maiden and the lord's son lived happily ever after for many, many years. And that is the end of our tale. So if you liked this tale, if you want to hear more, click that subscribe button down below, and don't forget to like this video, comment down below what you think of this tale, whether it's an early one, you prefer the Bluebeard version, or whether you've read The Robber Bridegroom or Fitcher's Bird, which is another of the Grimm tales around this kind of thing. Let me know, and as always, don't go marrying rich men who rock up to your house and say that they're going to take you to their castle. They're probably lying.